Hi all, it's Kara from the Transformation Mom for ABCDE, and here is my classics challenge for Nik the Booksmith. Can you guess what book I did? You're correct, it's Moby Dick, or The Whale by Herman Melville. So, the image on the front, I designed, I made the stencil for it, and so this was completely designed by me. The images are actually free clip art that I got, so I just added them all together and arranged them in a way that I could make the stencil. Here I got my sewing machine and actually had embroidered that. This was using the original Adventures in Booksmithing course along with the hollow back binding. So you can see how thick and beautiful this turned out. My sari silk ribbon was actually hand dyed by me, so I actually love the color. It actually turned out really nice, and it looks really nice with the color that I ended up choosing for the book. So, Moby Dick. It's about a guy named Ishmael, and Ishmael's in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and he's there, and he's in a whaler's inn, and he has decided to make a voyage, and he used to be a merchant, and now he wants to be a whaler, and so he's in New Bedford, Massachusetts, deciding that he's going to be a whaler. And he ends up at this inn, and he ends up having to share a bed with this strange harpooner named Queequeg. And, you know, Queequeg has a strange appearance, he does strange things, he has this little idol that he's always with. But in the end, Ishmael and Queequeg become these really, really good friends. And they end up traveling to Nantucket and take the ferry to Nantucket, and that was the capital of the whaling industry. So that's the whole beginning of the book. So I put this picture. This is actually Herman Melville, who wrote the book in 1806. You can see that, you know, that's just his picture. I kind of was trying to find a picture of Ishmael that was on free or public domain, but nowhere could I find a really great picture, so I put Herman Melville in there instead. So you can see there's lots of pockets and tuck spots and tags and stuff. I'll talk about the mailing in a little bit. You know, when you're on a that was out of frame. When you're on a whaling boat, you fish and you can catch fish to eat. So I have some embossed fish in there. I put the key in there to actually represent the inn, that when Ishmael and Queequeg had to share a bed together. It was really funny because Ishmael showed up first, and they were talking about how he had to share a bed, and he was like, there's this guy that I'm not even, so he tried to stay awake as long as he could to meet the guy he was sharing a bed with, and he didn't. So he ends up getting into bed, and then the strange harpooner walks in, and the scene erupts, and he, calls the lady who runs the inn, and she comes. So I kind of put that key there to as a reminder of the inn that he stayed at with Queequeg when he met him. And of course, they're going whaling, so I had, there's lots of images of whales in here. This was most of the paper that's in here was from the Seafarer collection from Authentique, and this was actually the quote that was on the top of the paper of like what you would cut off to make it 12 by 12. So it says, "The sea once it cast its spell, holds one in its net of wonders forever." Jacques Cousteau. And so I thought that was really fitting for Ishmael because he really has this affinity for the sea. So our story started in New Bedford with Queequeg, but then they end up in Nantucket, in the whaling capital of the world at the time. And this talks about what was in the 17th century, 18th century, and 19th century in Nantucket. And this is just a map of Nantucket, and I actually found this in the free public domain, and I loved that this is where our story starts, his whaling story starts, and so I really just liked having that there as a reminder to Ishmael, because this might be his travel journal, that's where he started out. And again, he had to stay with Queequeg, and it says, "Better to sleep with a sober cannibal than a drunk Christian." So that was kind of his thoughts about, being with Queequeg. Here's just a little ship and a little tuck spot there. I really like the stars. It reminded me of being on a boat, and my husband and I are divers, and I just remember laying out on the boat and laying and looking at the stars above. So, and a few times they talk about the stars. Another embossed piece. These Nik the Booksmith had put up on her thing as free ephemera, so I used some of those in here. Another quote from the book. then he finally gets on the Pequod. So now he's on the ship, and there's all this anticipation, and he is on the ship, but Queequeg is actually higher than him because Queequeg's a harpooner, and he's just a lonely whaler. And so I put the anchor there as a reminder, like now he's on a ship and he's a person on the ship. It says, "As for me, I am tormented with everlasting itch for things remote. I love to sail forbidden seas and land on barbarous coast." And I just thought that was fitting as they started their journey into the land. So I said I would talk about the letters and the envelopes. So I have lots of envelopes in here and postcards and such. So when you're on a whaling boat, you never know where you're going to end up. And so what would happen was every whaling boat that would leave Nantucket would get a bag full of mail. And then as they were floating around the sea or the ocean, and they were going all around on their travels, every time they would meet a boat, you would get the latest news, and you would also exchange letters. And that's how they would, get their mail. Stenciled thing, ship wheel, again, another night sky. In there's a couple times where they're, sitting there singing underneath the stars and everything else. So again, I just really liked that motif. So here is actually a picture of Queequeg the harpooner in one of the little boats. So I just thought that was a neat picture. Again, I got this from the public domain, so it's free for use. Embossing. These are all from Stampers Anonymous set. That was a Tim Holtz set. So Stampers Anonymous, I love them. This is just a playing card that had a sailboat. They meet lots of different sailboats as they go along. And of course, Captain Ahab, the only thing he cares about the whole story is killing Moby Dick, because Moby Dick took his leg. So that's, every time he stops, that's the only news he wants to know. Have you seen Moby Dick? And then when they say no, then they move on. Again, from Stampers Anonymous. This was just a book page that I actually got from Selena over at Above Par Crafts. Here it is. So, in the middle of the book, Ishmael talks a lot about the different types of whales. So you'll see there's all the different types of whales. This is actually a big pocket, so whoever will be using this journal could put little treasures in there. Some more quotes from the book. Again, another really big, deep pocket. The other side of that book page. Here's another whale. Here's humpback breaching. He talks a lot about the breaching of the whale, the fin coming out. As they're trying to capture them, the whales are doing this to try to submerge their boats and flip them over and hurt them, because they're going to hurt them. He talks a lot about the narwhal, so I just wanted to put one in there. And then again, this is a free image from the Whaling Museum, and you can see there's a whale on the side of the ship, and you can see kind of how they would hook that up there. And so when they catch the first whale, they put it on the side like that. And so I just thought that was a cool picture to show you kind of how that happens. Again, the tail coming up. Another quote. Again, this is another image that Nik the Booksmith had put up for free on her site. And I liked it because, again, they're meeting all these different ships as they travel. Another quote from the book. And we're going to keep going. Here's another envelope and just a little card in a tuck spot. Some of the paper actually came from a Reflections collection also that I got at Michael's on clearance. Again, the other side of that picture. So at one time they could have two whales on both sides, so that was kind of neat. And here's some little ships and oars and everything else that, again, was from Nik the Booksmith, and I just really like that. If we keep going, another letter, another little tag, another book ship, and it talks about the meeting of the ships. So that's kind of, again, they met lots of ships. And the last ship that they meet is actually the Rachel. And when they meet that ship, the captain says that he has seen the white whale, and it took his son. And so it was the whole Captain Ahab's like, okay, we got to go get this. You know, it says it's not down on any map. True places never are. And so another quote from the book. Some more pages. And this image is another one that Nik the Booksmith made. And then I have actually the black and white image of it also. It says, talk not to me of blasphemy, man, I'd strike the sun if it insulted me. Another text spot with some goodies in it, and another envelope. And here is finally Captain Ahab's getting ready to get the whale. And it says, all that most maddens and torments, all that stirs up the lees of things, all truth with malice in it, all that cracks the sinews and cakes the brain, all the subtle diminishes of life and thought, all evil to crazy Ahab, were visibly personified and made practically assailable in Moby Dick. And so here he is. He's getting ready to go get the whale. Right before that, they're in this terrible storm, and you know it's pretty much like a tropical depression or like a typhoon. And so I really wanted to like get the waves and that kind of stuff. This was a free image from the Library of Congress. Again, it's in the public domain. And this was actually the whole trail of where they went and finally when they met Moby Dick. So they, you know, started in here, you know, Nantucket, and then, you know, through the Atlantic and the Indian and the Pacific, and finally met their demise by Moby Dick. So you can see that Moby Dick finally eats their ship, and he ends up sinking the ship. And in the end, Ishmael, spoiler alert, Ishmael ends up living. And so the whole Moby Dick was written by Ishmael because he lived and he was able to tell the story. So I hope you enjoyed this tome. I really greatly enjoyed building it. You know, I've had my challenges, and I'm just so excited how it turned out. Again, my name is Kara from the Transformation Mom for ABCDE. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. God bless.